Grace and peace, beloved of God, is Apostle Cheryl L. Richardson. We are here with another broadcast, Shatter the Silence. The topic for today is, what is coercive control? I'm going to give you all a few minutes to find us, to realize that we're live. And what I can do while we're waiting, hold on one second. Just share some information with you while we're waiting for others to come on, okay? As you know, the Lord has given us a mandate to address domestic violence. It's a silent epidemic within the church, across denominational lines, right? So this is not an opportunity for one denomination or one ethnicity to point fingers at the other. Domestic violence is, in fact, a silent epidemic within the church, across denominational lines, across cultural lines, across faith lines. It doesn't matter if you are Jewish, if you are Muslim, if you are Baptist, if you are Catholic. It doesn't matter. It is a silent epidemic within the church, across denominations, and it's important that we remember that, so that we don't get into the habit of looking across the aisle at a denomination that is different from our own, right? And attributing these horrible statistics to them, because we are all complicit. We're all complicit. And it's very concerning, because there are many who occupy leadership positions in ministry who are guilty. They are perpetrators of domestic violence, or they are guilty of doing nothing about it when it's brought to their attention. We shared with you some statistics on last week that let you know that 65% of pastors underestimate the presence of it in their own congregations. So it's like those of us who can acknowledge that it exists, right, minimize to the extent to which it exists in our own ministries. And so, hey Anna, let me wave to y'all. Share, because you all know I am horrible about remembering to say share. So share, I'm going to say it like 3 or 4 times, because I probably won't think to say it anymore. And also, if you want to sow into our ministry, the information is on the page. It's Judas Roar. If it's Cash App, it's paypal.me/Judas Roar. If you want to give by way of PayPal. The things that God has given us to do are not free. They absolutely cost money. And we've always been willing to spend our own to further the ministry. So that's not an issue for us. It will get done one way or the other. Anything that you choose to sow will be greatly appreciated and put to good use. But if don't nobody give nothing, we going forth anyhow, okay? Because we have a charge to keep and a God to glorify. So we thank you for joining us on today. Again, share. And we're going to talk about what coercive control is today. What you'll notice as we get into this discussion is that many of the things that fall under this umbrella, coercive control is kind of like an umbrella. If you think about all the red flags that we've spoken about in the past, the majority of them would fall under coercive control. Okay, so that's just to kind of put it in context for you. This is not a brand new thing. It's a new way of looking at some old things. Okay, hey Hannah. So it's a new way of looking at some old things. But I want to leave some facts with you. First of all, there's a tendency when someone shares with a family member or loved one about an abusive situation that they may be experiencing, people will say, get out, just get out. I wouldn't let them treat me this way. What's wrong with you? Don't you care about your children? Those are all the wrong things to say, just off the top of your head, okay? Instinctively, you want a person that you care about to get to a place of safety. But the objective is they need to be able to do it safely. So we encourage, insist, we are adamant about having a safety plan. No matter if you think your abusive partner will escalate to physical abuse or not, a safety plan is needed. It is needed. And no matter what part of this journey you're on, if you are currently in an abusive situation, if you just left, if you're in it and you just think, it's going to be all right after a while and you just want to give it another try, either way, no matter what the circumstance, you need a safety plan. A safety plan is needed. And I would say, especially if you plan to stay. You need a safety plan. If you go onto our our blog, www.judasroar.com. You will, if you sign up for the blog, then we'll send you automatically a template that we've developed for a safety plan that's pretty all-inclusive. Now, my safety plan might not look exactly like your safety plan, but it's a good thing to have a template so that you can make sure that you're looking at everything that you need to look at, okay? So again, you have to have a safety plan. And the other thing that I want you to know is that leaving the abuser, right, and we're not talking about coercive control yet, but leaving the abuser does not guarantee your safety. And many times a victim won't leave because they are really sensitive to that. They understand that it's dangerous to even consider leaving, okay? 75% of domestic violence homicides occurred when victims were leaving or attempting to leave. So the other thing that we would warn you against, and please hear me, is do not, in the heat of the moment, do not, because you feeling empowered, you find in your voice, do not say, if you do that again, I'm going to leave you. Don't do that, because you start this whole set of events in motion. Now they're thinking, he or she is considering leaving. What must I do to prevent that? Okay, so don't, sometimes you just have to move in silence. It's best just not to say anything. And at the point at which you decide, okay, I'm leaving this situation is making me sick, this situation is not healthy. Hey, Dr. V, this situation is not healthy. You want to move in silence. Wisdom would dictate that you move in silence. Do not make any public service announcements about your plans. Don't do that, okay? Do not, in the middle of an argument with your abuser, start spewing the names of all the people who are providing you support, because you put them in danger when you do that, okay? And so these are all things that you want to consider, because it's a very complex situation. It's not as simple as, I'm leaving. It's just not. There are too many moving parts. There's too many variables, okay? And as I just said, 75% of domestic violence homicides occur, right, when the victim is leaving. Physically leaving, talking about leaving, planning to leave. You want to be careful, okay? You want to be careful. All right. We're going to talk about coercive control. So I've given you all time. Please share. I've given you all time to get some more folk on here. Coercive control is a term that was coined by sociologist Dr. Evan Stark. And you all know I like definitions, right? I like to understand what it is we're talking about. And the reason for that is this. Even from a spiritual standpoint, right? How we define a thing determines how we view a thing. How we define a thing and the definition that we accept for that thing determines, especially if it's warfare of any type, it determines what weaponry we decide we need to bring to the fight in order to level the playing field, right? It determines what we need to bring. So it's important that we're embracing definitions that are legitimate, right? I'll give you an example. If you're in an abusive situation, your partner's not always telling you about your strengths and how amazing you are and how important you are to them. There are times when they're telling you that you don't have any value. Hey, Alicia, there are times when they're telling you that they're telling you don't have any value. You know, you're stupid, you're a failure, you're this, that, and the other, right? If you accept, right, and if you stay long enough, you will, because that's the only way you can stay. Remember we talked about before, the longer you stay in it, the sicker you become. They're sick and you get sick right along with them, right? But the longer you stay, and this is the underpinning of any type of abusive situation, the longer you stay in it, the more you gravitate towards accepting their definition for who you are, right? They're accepting, hey Barbara, you're accepting their definition. Because if you didn't accept their definition on some level, you'd got out of there early on. At some point, you started believing what they were saying. And so it's important that we define a thing accurately. The moment we assign an inappropriate or an inaccurate definition to a situation, whatever we bring to it is the wrong thing. It's the wrong thing. It's like bringing a baseball bat to a gunfight. It's like bringing a water gun to a gunfight. It doesn't make any sense. there's no way you can win. You're not equipped properly, right? And so this is one of the reasons why we feel that we must continue to do these Facebook Lives. We want to save lives. We want people to understand that they have value, right? That God decided when he created them that they had value, and nobody has a right to decide that they don't, period. It's just that simple. The people that we love have value. The people that we don't care for that much have value. The ones that we really don't like at all, they have value too. Okay, so we all have value. The only way you stay in an abusive situation is if you begin to accept the abuser's definition for who you are and what you're capable of, right? Once you accept that, now they've got control. And that's the underpinning of abuse. So when we talk about coercive control and when we talk about red flags, hey Jerry, when we talk about red flags, we're talking about the different techniques that are used by an abusive person to gain control of someone, all right? So listen carefully. Okay, we said that coercive control, right, was a coin that was a term that was coined by sociologist Dr. Evan Stark. Now, when we look at the definition of the word coercive, when we look at the definition for the word coercive, it is relating to or using force or threats. Relating to or using force or threats. And I submit to you that there is no abusive relationship without force or threats being utilized. It's not happening. Okay? It's not happening. All right. It is ongoing psychological behavior rather than an isolated incident. And the purpose is to eliminate the victim's freedom. So the purpose of an abusive mechanism coming into play in a relationship is to strip the victim of the knowledge. Hey, Jakayla, is to strip the victim of the knowledge that they do have value. To strip them of a sense of self and a sense of purpose, right? To strip them of an ability to trust their own gut instincts, right? And if you're a spiritual person, to trust the Spirit of God when he speaks to you. And so once they can accomplish that, now they've got you. They can tell you whatever they want to tell you. They can tell you whatever you want to tell you, and you will accept it because you have embraced the wrong definition. So definitions are important. All right. It's important to remember when you're talking about coercive control that it's ongoing. It's not an isolated incident. It's not they had a bad day at work and came home and clowned a little bit, but then now they're sorry and it never happens again. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about if you were to step back and look at this thing over time. Hey, Ambassador Charlotte, if you were to step back and look at this thing over time, you would realize, right, that they are playing you. And every day it's something. Every other day it's something. And abuse happens in a cycle. It's always a cycle. The only thing that differs is the amount of time from one phase of the cycle to the next phase of the cycle. And that depends on the people involved. That depends on the circumstances involved. It depends on how long it takes you to start coming to yourself, right? Before you start realizing, wait, I'm being mistreated. Then it becomes necessary to exert force and control again to get you back under control. Okay? This is how abuse works. This is how it works. All right? We talked about how there are chemicals actually released in the brain. We talked about this, I think, maybe 2 Facebook Lives ago, about how the brain is affected by ongoing abuse. That chemicals are released, right, that cause us to feel a certain way. So it's not as simple as, I'm not putting up with this anymore and I'm leaving. Because the moment you do that, then there's this longing to get back with the person who's mistreating you. And people outside of the situation cannot understand what's wrong with you, right? They cannot understand. And so at this point, they may become frustrated with you. You may lose friends because you're still in a situation that you don't feel prepared to leave. You may lose family members. And I would just submit to you, don't be too hard on them. They have a hard time watching you get treated the way you're being treated, right? It's triggering to them to watch you go through what you're going through. And so on the one hand, it's not fair to insist that they hang around and observe something that you're choosing to do for whatever reason, okay? Healthy boundaries would require, right, that somebody's not coddling you while you're staying in a situation that could cost you your life. Because at the end of the day, if you choose to stay and you end up killed, now they have to live with the fact that they coddled you and they didn't say what they really felt they needed to say. So I would encourage, you all to be honest with people, to be honest with victims, but speak the truth in love. Try not to be harsh. Try not to be judgmental. Understand that even if you've gone through a similar situation, your situation is not exactly like their situation, because your abuser is not their abuser, okay? So there are different dynamics that come into play. We're still talking about coercive control. Hey, Percy. We're still talking about coercive control. Now, Dr. Stark says that compliance is fear-based, and if there's no fear, then there's no coercive control. Okay? Now, when there is fear, when a victim does genuinely fear the abuser, there's a whole lot of control that is there. And the fear is very, very real. The fear is real. The fear is not based on imaginary concerns, anxiety, neurosis, any of that. The fear is real because what they understand is what the abuser is actually capable of. And the victim knows that better than anybody. The victim knows that better than anybody, okay? It's not often that an abuser will allow an opportunity to exert this force and to exert control to go by. So every opportunity they have, they want you to understand that I'm in charge and I can take your life if I choose to take your life, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. This is what they'll tell you, okay? Coercive control is found in 86% of all reported domestic abuse cases. 40% of cases have serial abuse in which the woman is physically assaulted several times per week. Okay? So again, from relationship to relationship, this whole thing, it can look a little different. And if it's spaced just right, the victim will think that they're overreacting, that they're being unreasonable. Okay? If it's spaced out enough. When it escalates to a place where it's happening all the time, the average victim will figure out, wait a minute, this is not normal. This is not normal. Why am I being treated this way? And they still may not have the wherewithal to get out of that situation, okay? Those relationships last on average 5.5 years. So in a relationship where the victim is being physically assaulted several times a week, people stay on average 5.5 years in a situation like that. So imagine how damaged they are. Hey, Prophet Ken, imagine how damaged they are by the time they exit, if they are even able to exit. The other thing that I want to insert here is this, because we're all about busting the myths that are associated. Hey, Joseph, busting the myths that are associated with domestic violence. Okay, men can be victims too. Men can be victims too. And I'm telling you, if you have a woman who is abusive, she's a hot mess. Okay, I'm just gonna tell the truth. It's bad. Okay. The difference is that you have a decreased likelihood of severe physical injury from a woman. And it's not that they won't become physical. They absolutely will become physical, okay? But just because of strength alone, okay? A man becoming physically assaultive usually has a greater physical impact than a woman unless a weapon is introduced, okay? So you may hear me sometimes say she, but men can be victims too. Everybody clear about that? Men can be victims too. If you grasp that, type it in the comments, okay? Men can be victims as well. What else do I want you to know? We're still talking about myths. I think it's interesting that in the United Kingdom in 2015, they passed a law that made coercive control illegal. And so repeat offenders are looking at like 5 years prison time. That's in the United Kingdom. We need to get something like that going over here in the United States, because we are still kind of behind the 8 ball. We think that if someone's not physically hit, that they're not being abused, and that is not the case. And all this other stuff that leads up to the actual physical assault is just what's done to groom the victim and to get them into a position where they feel like they have no other options, okay? Coercive control is also found in institutions. This could be a whole Facebook Live topic by itself, and I may just end up doing one. And y'all pray for a sister, because people are going to get mad, but they'll be all right. It's also found in institutions, religious cults, and same-sex relationships. And it's also found in our mainstream religions that aren't even considered cults. Okay, but you have this cult-like activity. You've got this blind following of the leader, no matter what they did. It doesn't matter. And then, because we're good at this, we will misappropriate scripture to make it okay. Depending on who it is now. Depending on who it is. You got to be my favorite apostle, my favorite prophet, evangelist, teacher, minister of music, deacon, mother. And then you can do almost anything, and then we'll find a scripture to make it okay. But if the wrong person does it, they go into hell. They may as well grab a handbasket, okay? And we need to stop that because that's foolishness. Okay. Generally, though, the abused are female and the abuser is male. So more often than not, just based on what's reported, and we understand that many men don't report the abuse because many of them don't understand that they're being abused, okay? And then some of them are embarrassed to report it. And then those who do report it really do run a very real risk of not being taken seriously, being laughed at, being dismissed by those who are supposed to help them, whether it be law enforcement, it could be a therapist, it could be a pastor. But for a man to say that he's being abused, he's almost looked down upon. So it takes a lot of courage for them to come forward in the first place, and there's a very large possibility that they're not going to get the help that they would get if they were a woman, okay? Generally, the abused are female and the abuser is male. Now, here's another myth that we want to address. The abused are usually not outwardly passive. The victim is not usually outwardly passive. And people think that it's the mild-mannered, quiet, soft-spoken, unassuming people who often become victims of abusers. And they do. But they don't present a challenge to an abuser who is most likely a narcissist and who wants to feel like they are exerting control. It's no fun if you just kind of go along with it because you can't locate your spine. That's no fun for them. They would much rather take someone who has a voice, right, and subdue that voice and bring that voice under subjection. So they're not normally someone who's outwardly passive. Now let me digress just a little bit. If you look at another form of abuse, you can look at child abuse, child sexual assault. Let's look at that. I've treated many patients as a therapist who have been victims of childhood sexual assault. I have treated many perpetrators because I used to run a sex offenders program in Minnesota, okay? And I really had to, I was like, God, you're going to help me to understand how to carry this right here because I'd like to smack them, but I have to treat them instead. So he helped me, and I learned a lot because I asked them questions. I asked them questions because I wanted to understand how to best dismantle that demonic activity that they were engaged in and how to get ahead of it. And this is what they told me, okay? Now, I'm digressing and addressing child sexual assault just for a second because the parallels are mind-blowing in any type of warfare, even spiritual warfare. This is what they told me. Yes, they look for the quiet, soft-spoken child. No, it could be a teenager. The quiet, soft-spoken one. But they look for the one that is disjointed in terms of their family relationship. They look for the one specifically who doesn't have a parent or guardian or mentor that's close to them that they listen to. So they look for the quiet one, the sad one that's off on their own in the corner and appears to have no support. But they also, and this blew my mind, they also specifically look for that loud, braggadocious, confident, I got it all together one. The gang member, okay? The one that wants to rob the convenience store after dark. They look for them because if they can get them, they are confident. And I'm telling you what they told me because I asked them to their face, right? They are confident that once they assault them, they will never tell anybody. So being confident, being out there, not being afraid of anything can make you a target, makes you a target, makes you a challenge for a perpetrator or offender of any type. Because now the thrill comes from, can I break this individual down? Can I rein this person in? The one that's quiet and passive and doesn't put up a fight, I mean, okay, whatever. But the one that has potential, the one that has leadership ability. Because if you think about it, if you're talking about a gang member, you're talking about a bank robber, whoever you're talking about out there who is confident and goes after what they want and this and that and the other, right? How willing are they going to be to tell anybody that they've been sexually assaulted? Are they going to ever tell? Probably not. That's what offenders know. So, if you fast forward, okay, let's go back to coercive control and domestic violence. The man or woman who has a flourishing career, who has an education, who has a powerful ministry, who has a big following, right? Do you understand how appealing you are to an abuser? Because if they can gain control of you, they have accomplished something. Plus, you've got these resources, right? You've got these internal resources. You've got this inner strength and this inner confidence. You've got this phenomenal prayer life. You've got all this stuff going for you, right? If they can get you, they've got something. So this myth that abusive people only go after people who don't have any no, only in the short term. Only in the short term. Because they understand that that person doesn't have a whole lot for them to take in the first place, right? They're after people who have something, whether it be finances, whether it be a ministry platform, whether it be they're an entrepreneur, they're a professional. They can be a doctor, they can be an attorney, okay? They can be whatever profession, you name it. They can be whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And so understand, again, so we're talking again about definition. It's important that we define things the right way. If we don't understand how the enemy is functioning, whatever we bring to it is not going to be the right thing. The prayer is not going to be the right prayer. The intercession won't be the right intercession. The practical help won't be the right practical help. Okay? It just won't. We have to understand what the actual issue is, and we have to understand the extent of the issue so that we know how much force, how much attention, how many resources need to be brought to bear on that thing, okay? And so oftentimes we don't slow down enough to understand what's really going on around us, and then when we offer help, it's not help. If we offer help, it's not help. If somebody says, okay, I don't have any food, and you offer to pay their light bill, what in the world? They can light a candle and get some light. They need to eat, right? They need to eat. If they don't eat, they go die. Dead people don't need lights, okay? So we have to know what the issue is and address the actual issue. We have to make sure that we're defining it appropriately as well, okay? So often there are professionals, we said that, who are well respected in their careers, and they may be ashamed to ask for help, okay? And like I said, they can be a doctor, social worker, attorney, a minister, a bishop, apostle, musician. It doesn't matter. The shame factor kicks in, and they're ashamed because they feel like, I'm smarter than this. How did I even get in this situation, right? How did I get in this situation? There was a situation in Ohio several months back in which a judge, and for those of you who think that African Americans don't get into this, he was African American, okay? A few years back, had gotten into a verbal dispute with his wife, who was a school teacher. And he smashed her head into the dash of their vehicle 20 times with their 2 small children in the back seat, right? He got some jail time. He literally broke her face. She had to have reconstructive surgery. He pushed her out the car, left her on the side of the road for dead, and some bystander saw her laying there, okay? All of these ministers, apostles, bishops, came to his defense and talked about what an amazing person he was. He was a judge. He was a judge, sitting on the bench deciding other people's fate. So I'm trying to tell you, anybody can be a victim and anybody can be an abuser, okay? No exceptions. Domestic violence does not discriminate at all. So they came to court and they spoke on his behalf about how amazing he was and the difference he made in the community, and he deserved another chance. So he got jail time, but he didn't spend a whole lot of time in jail, okay? Once he was released from prison, he came out, and a few months later, shot and killed her, murdered her. And I wondered, how do these men of God, how do these people feel that they advocated for him? that they advocated for him, and he killed her. Okay? So what am I saying? I'm saying it doesn't matter what your station is in life. Okay? If you are an abusive person, there is something wrong with you. And you breaking another person's not going to fix it. It's not going to fix it. It won't. And so for those of us who maybe look at a victim and say, well, you're a doctor, or you're a teacher, or you're a nurse, or you're a state's attorney, and you're going through this, doesn't make any difference. Doesn't make any difference. There was a doctor in Canada not too long ago who was murdered by her husband, who was also a doctor. He murdered her, put her body in a suitcase, dumped it in a river, and went to work and performed surgery on people the same day. Okay? So why am I sharing these things? I'm sharing these things so that we can understand that it's not just low-income people who, need public assistance and, had a horrible childhood that are dealing with this. This crosses socioeconomic, educational, every barrier that we like to put up to differentiate ourselves from one another. It affects all of them across the board. And the thing is, the more educated, right, the more accomplished a person is, the less likely they are to say that they're being mistreated, because they don't understand how they got there themselves. Okay? All right. Women are not less jealous, controlling, or abusive, but they have fewer opportunities to engage in coercive control. So one of the things that's utilized in coercive control, and this is one of the red flags, is financial abuse, right? You may be working full-time, part-time, whatever, but you don't have any control over your paycheck. Your partner has total control. And this is not because you all sat down over tea and crumpets and made an agreement about who handles the finances best. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you went to work, you got your check, give it here. And then I'm doling out to you gas money. I'm just enough for you to get back and forth to work, because I don't want you to be able to get anywhere else. I'm doling out to you in allowance. And this is not a mutually agreed upon thing. It's not a thing where you all are just trying to do things together. One partner's been manipulated by the other partner. And what they understand is they better hand over their paycheck, period. Okay? So when you're talking about financial abuse, it's one of the aspects of coercive control, because without finances, you can't even leave. You can't leave, right? If they don't give you enough gas money, you can't even get back and forth to work. So where are you going when you don't have any control over your finances, right? So that's one of the aspects, and this is why I said in the beginning that coercive control is like the umbrella under which a lot of these other tactics fall, all right? So because of the proportions in terms of financial control, even now in the workplace, men still get paid significantly more than women for the same type of work, okay? So they have an advantage financially. So it's not that the women don't have the finances, access to the finances, for oftentimes doing the same job that men have. So it puts them in a position where they're a little bit more vulnerable, okay? Let's see. What else would I want you to know? Let's look at some of the characteristics of coercive control. And remember, I said that this an umbrella under which a lot of these tactics you'll see we've talked about before, because in the past we've talked about gun violence, we've talked about trauma bonding, we've talked about the financial aspects. We talked about when domestic violence comes to the workplace, how that can affect a person's ability to even maintain employment and all of that. Okay, so all of these things are related. So number one, we're talking about characteristics now of coercive control. Unreasonable demands. They're usually followed with threats, pressure, or physical abuse if the victim does not submit. If a victim stays long enough, at some point they'll submit because it's easier than fighting, in the hopes that it won't go any further. 90% of the time, that's not the case. That's not the case, because now a boundary's been crashed and you've kind of been complicit in the crashing of the boundary, okay? Number two, degradation or bullying. So humiliating the victim in front of others, right? in front of your friends at church, in front of family, in front of your friends. It may be cloaked in, I'm just playing, I didn't mean it, you don't have a sense of humor, right? But bullying verbally and making a person feel small, because again, the abuser can't abuse you unless they change the way you're looking at yourself. So they've got to redefine your definition. They've got to get you to accept and embrace their definition regarding who you are and what your value is, okay, and what your capabilities are, all right? And so that's something that's at work all the time. Remember, when we're talking about coercive control, we're talking about ongoing shenanigans, okay? Number 3, restricting daily activities. This might look like you're unable to complete your routine. Maybe you go to the gym 3-4 times a week. Maybe you go longer. They don't want you to do that. Maybe you hike. I love to hike. Maybe you hike. They don't want you to do that. It's not safe. But, all these reasons why you can't do it. So if you look at your life and you find that you're no longer doing the things that you enjoy, I'm talking about healthy activities. I'm not talking about illegal stuff, okay? Things that you did that helped you to feel good about yourself. Things that you did that helped you to feel empowered or to reduce stress in a healthy manner. And you find that you're no longer doing those things. Now I want to ask yourself why. Why am I not doing that anymore? Why is it such a problem when I get ready to go do it? What is the problem, okay? Threats or intimidation is number 4, and they are used to force your behavior to change. And this includes sex too. Threats and intimidation, it can be verbal, it can be body language, posturing. It may involve breaking something that is important to you, tearing something up that is important to you, all right? But threats or intimidation are used if whatever you're doing does not meet their level of satisfaction, and this can include sexual activity as well, okay? Number 5, financial control. The victim's money is doled out as an allowance, okay? And there's constant monitoring. Hey, Prophet, Laron, there's constant monitoring of the finances. And again, we're not talking about an agreement that you all had at the beginning of the relationship. We're going to share the money 50-50. This is what we're going to do. You're going to pay the bills. I'm going to buy the groceries. That's not what we're talking about. Unless that was done under duress. Okay? Because you can start that early. What we're really talking about is you go to work, you give me your paycheck, and I'll tell you what money you have to spend. And it's probably not going to be much. I'm going to give you gas money so you can get back and forth to work. And I'm probably checking your odometer as well. Okay? I'm probably checking your odometer as well. So that degree of financial control, in the very beginning, it can feel like, I'm protected, I'm safe, we have a plan, we want to buy a house, we want to do this, or they're better with the finances than I am. But if you don't have access to the money that you earned, that's a problem. That's a tremendous red flag, okay? Tremendous red flag. So financial control is one thing that we know that we can look at, coercive control, and we know that that's one of the hallmarks, okay? We know that that's one of the hallmarks. All right. Monitoring of time. Okay, so what we're talking about here is unwanted, intrusive monitoring of time. Not let me know when you get home safely, or you have a routine of calling maybe on your way into work. Hey, Prophet Cherie. But we're talking about monitoring your time. You said you were going to the grocery store. It is 12.5 minutes away. It should only take 10 minutes for you to pick up what you said you went to get. And it takes 12.5 minutes to get back. So that's 35 minutes total. And you've been gone an hour. Where have you been? Intrusive monitoring of time. Intrusive. Feels invasive. Feels like you're being violated. Feels like you're not being trusted. Feels like you're being, hey, pastor. Seems like you're not being trusted. Okay, and so these are all things that you want to be sensitive to. And typically when this is going on, there's some verbal stuff going on too. There's some verbal stuff going on too, because the objective is to gain control of you and to cause you to accept their definition for who you are and what you are capable of accomplishing in this life, okay? Hey, Prophet Hightower. All right, so we talked about monitoring of time. Commandeering your communication devices, okay? So what does this look like? Taking your phone, all right? Changing the password on your phone or your iPad or your tablet, okay? So that you can't use them. And then hacking into your social media accounts as well, okay? Now let me just say this. You know, oftentimes when people are in a situation, they feel like maybe the other person is being unfaithful or whatever, then they start to snooping and looking and digging and carrying on. Don't take that bait. Don't do that. Consider this. If that becomes necessary, then you've been defining your relationship inappropriately the entire time. Okay, you've been defining your relationship inappropriately the entire time. And we talked about in the very beginning how it's important that we define things appropriately. Hey, Ron, that we define things appropriately. Once we begin to accept the enemy's definition for our situation, our circumstances, who we are, the wheels are coming off the bus. It's just a matter of time. The wheels are coming off the bus. It's just a matter of time. And this is why it's so important that we have people around us, hey Barbara, that we have people around us who will speak the truth in love and tell us the truth regarding what they're observing. Okay, now, for those of you who may now be engrossed in an abusive situation, consider this. The people who are close to you, you can't listen to them because they're too close to you and they can't be objective. And the ones who aren't that close to you can't talk to you because they don't know you well enough to speak into your life. So who does that leave? It leaves you with your abuser. Hey, Dr. Jen, it leaves you with your abuser. And with your definition over time being worn down, so now you see yourself the way they tell you that you should see yourself. Okay, you understand how this all works together? All right. And so another thing is restricting your physical movement. Maybe physically refusing to let you leave the house. It can be something as simple as, hey, Bishop, Brian Keith Williams. It could be something as simple as you have a disagreement, you want to step away to get some air, and they're blocking your exit from the door. Look, let me help somebody. Even in a psychiatric hospital, right? I'm a career mental health professional. Even in a locked psychiatric facility, where people act out and have to go to another locked room where the door is locked. By law, you cannot stand in the doorway and refuse them to leave. And these are people that are identified as being psychologically off balance. They are aggressive. They are confrontational, okay? They won't hesitate to hurt you. You cannot put your body in the doorway and prevent them from leaving. It's against the law. So how much more for a perfectly, seemingly normal human being who's living their life, right? How much more wrong is it for someone to simply block your exit from a room? That's not okay. It's not okay. But if we minimize that, right? And if we accept the definition, that the abuser would want us to accept, then it's okay for them to block our exit from the home or block our exit from the room. And then you crank it up a notch, and now you're getting locked in a room. You're getting locked in a closet. You can't interact with other people. This is all coercive control. And so again, if in a psych hospital you can't put a piece of furniture in the doorway and prevent a patient from leaving the room, it's against the law. Against the law. The facility will get cited and fined for doing that. Can't do it. Doesn't matter what they're doing. Doesn't matter what they're saying. It doesn't matter if they just spat in your face. It doesn't matter if they just punched you in your face. You cannot block them from leaving a space without a doctor's order, period. So if you're outside and you're not, hey Michelle, and you're not a psych patient, okay? How wrong is it for somebody to prevent you from leaving? You're having a dispute, you're having a verbal altercation, and you want to leave and they won't let you. Red flag, red flag, red flag. If somebody doesn't want to talk to you, don't talk to them. Leave them alone. Leave them alone. This is what normal people do. They just leave you alone, okay? Because no real communication is going to happen anyway. But that's for the person who has a goal of improving the relationship over time. Okay. All right. So restricting physical movement. They may not let you use your own car. It's your car, but you cannot drive it unless they're in it with you, unless they dole out the gas money and you can come back. All of that is coercive control. All right. Restrict your interactions with family and friends. Now, sometimes this may be spoken blatantly. You know, your mama is, you know, in our business all the time, or, you know, here we go. We'll misappropriate scripture for this for real. You're supposed to leave your father and your mother and cleave to, okay. All right. We need to use these things the right way. We need to quit using the word of God to keep folk bound. Okay. Stop it. Deprivation of food or nutrition. So again, that loops back around to, hey Barbara, that loops back around to the financial aspect. If you don't give them money so they can go grocery shopping, then you keep the food supply down. Why is that important? Because without proper nutrition, can you make proper decisions? Can you process things properly? No, you cannot. No, you cannot. If you're not eating right, if you're not getting the proper nutrition, if you're not getting the proper rest. Another thing that coercive control can present as deciding they want to have a deep and mystical, heavy-duty conversation at 3 a.m. and they know you have to get up and go to work at 6. Y'all been in the house together all day, but they don't want to talk till 3 a.m. Okay, that's a tactic that is used to throw the victim off base, cause them to not function well at work. Okay, if you have an astute supervisor, they're going to notice you're not firing on all cylinders. Now you got pressure at work. And so this is what coercive control looks like. It's like a web that is woven around the intended victim. Okay, destruction of possessions. They might destroy your mail. They might delete your text messages, or anything that the victim values. Is open season. It could very well be destroyed. Okay. So practically speaking, what does coercive control looks like? It typically starts with love bombing. Okay. And we could do a Facebook Live on this love bombing alone. This is what happens. This is the condensed version in love bombing. They are the best thing since sliced bread. You are amazing. You are wonderful. I've never met anybody like you before in my life. Ever. Where have you been all my life? Here's one. I feel like I've known you my whole life. That's a familiar spirit. That is not normal. Okay? That is not God. If they haven't known you your entire life, you shouldn't feel like that. Shouldn't feel like that. Should not feel like that. I'm telling you. And people fall for this all the time. Because it sounds nice, right? The other thing is the gifts, the attention, the conversation. There's a tendency for people to be drawn to the one thing, right, that they didn't get from their previous partner, that they felt like they really, really needed. Maybe you're a person who likes to communicate. You like to talk, right? And your partner in the past was very quiet, didn't want to talk, didn't want to have a deep conversation with you. And so that left you feeling like you just needed someone who really, really would hear your heart, share your concerns, be a sounding board for you. You know, someone that you could have meaningful conversation with. That's not a bad thing to desire, okay? But what we have to guard against is this. You come from a relationship where that doesn't exist. And so now you are thirsty, okay, to use today's term, for someone who will listen to you, listen to your heart, listen to your ideas, you know, serve as a sounding board for you. And so here comes Ray Ray, okay? And Ray Ray is hanging on your every word. And Ray Ray thinks you are the funniest person they've ever talked to in their life. And they are just listening and listening and listening and giving you feedback and blah, blah, blah. But you're not paying attention to what else does Ray Ray bring to the table besides a great conversation. You start for conversation, so you're focused on the conversation. And you feel this need being met that you felt deprived of in the past, right? But on closer examination, Ray Ray got a ski mask hanging out his back pocket because he robs banks after hours, or, you know. And you're not paying attention. You're not paying attention to the other things. Is Ray Ray working? Does Ray Ray have a purpose or a goal? If you're a believer, is Ray Ray saved? Is he going to heaven? Who is he serving? What are his goals in life? what does he have to prove it? What is there any substance there, right? But we don't look that far because we're enthralled with the communication that we're getting that we felt starved for. And that is a tremendous, tremendous problem. So many times people are getting into relationships with people based on one dimension that's been presented over a short period of time, okay? Because the other aspect is, if you're dealing with an abuser, they will always rush you. They'll rush you because they don't want you to think. And they'll also rush you because they can't pretend to behave for too long, okay? They need you good and pulled in. They need you pulled in and committed before the mask falls. So the love bombing will involve feeling rushed, swept off your feet, all of this other stuff, because they already know they can't behave. They might have good 4 or 5 months in them, maybe, but most of them can't last that long. So they will rush you into a commitment, especially if you're a person where integrity is important, okay, where your word is important, where commitment is important to you. Well, I said I would do this, so I need to do this kind of thing. Let me tell you what God told me. When you find that you said something that you shouldn't have said, you need to establish that you shouldn't have never said it. That's what you need to do. So guess what? Guess who got fully delivered? Because integrity is very important to me. Okay? But if I find that I promised you something that I shouldn't have, this apostle is going to find you and tell you, you know what? I don't know what I was thinking, but I can't do that. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you. Okay? I don't want you to think. I don't want you to expect it. I'm not going to tell you I'm thinking about it because I'm not even thinking about it. I'm not doing it. Okay? So, in an ideal world, you don't commit to things that you cannot do. But the reality of it is, if you do, then you fix that. You don't follow the behavior. You don't do the thing that you shouldn't do because you said you would do it. That makes us, especially as believers, that makes us the standard by which we are governing our lives. And that's completely inaccurate. Our blood sugar level will determine how things appear to us, right? So we can't trust us with that. We need to be able to consult the Lord. And if it's something that's okay with him, fine. And if not, then it's not okay. Well, you said, but you know what? I did not consult God before I said that. Because if I had, and if he had told me to say yes, I would be able to do it. I can't do it. So I know he didn't tell me to do it. All right? Is that clear? All right. So it typically starts with love bombing. You feel rushed, butterflies, birds singing, and all this kind of stuff. But everything is fast. Don't want you to think about it. Okay? They may control your diet. They may use spyware. This is important. If you're in an abusive situation, you need to assume that there's spyware. On your phone, you need to assume that there's spyware. On your iPad, on your desktop, assume that there is spyware. Okay? It is so common. Just assume that. Assume there is a tracker in or on your vehicle somewhere. Assume it. Because if a person is that controlling, they're not satisfied with just your word regarding your location, who you're with, how long you've been there, and things like that. So, and it's a completely different mindset once that stuff starts to appear. Okay, that's it's very insidious. It's got sinister underpinnings. Okay. All right. The tricky thing about coercive control, these tactics that we're talking about, the financial abuse, the verbal abuse, the threats and intimidation, is they don't leave scars. They don't leave visible marks, okay? And so it's difficult sometimes to get people to believe that you're actually experiencing what you're experiencing. I would encourage you to reach out to a domestic violence advocate in your area. You can inbox me. If you don't know what to do, you can inbox me and we can figure it out. We can figure out a course of action. We can get you connected to some specialists in your area, all right? And we can certainly pray you through, because we believe God. It is not okay with him that domestic violence is a silent epidemic in the church. That is horrible. It's horrible. And it exists more so in Christian homes than in any other home. That should not be. That should not be. Okay? And for those who say, well, God hates divorce, makes my eye twitch when people misappropriate that scripture. That same passage of scripture in Malachi, the 2nd chapter, that nobody ever preaches from because they always want to talk about tithes and offering, okay? But in Malachi 2, he says that God hates divorce, but he also hates the way abusive folk treat the wives of their youth. He's not okay with it. And the scripture further states that the person who treats their partner this way does not have one iota of the Spirit of God living on the inside of them. Irregardless of the title, irregardless of you a bishop, apostle, evangelist, deacon, church mother, it doesn't matter to God. You don't have the Spirit of God living on the inside of you. That's the word. I didn't say it. You don't have the Spirit of God. There's none of him living on the inside of you if you are mistreating your spouse. Point blank, period. All right? So, we've talked about coercive control today and the fact that a lot of times it doesn't leave any visible marks, okay? Because a lot of it is psychological. Understand that it's ongoing. It's an ongoing thing. If you find yourself withdrawing from your family, from your friends, especially if you're withdrawing from people who have always been supportive of you in the past, okay? Understand that coercive control is most likely at work in your relationship. You don't feel comfortable talking to people who have always been there for you, right? Or you don't want to talk to anybody who's going to say anything negative about your man or your woman. All right? This is what I've learned. I can hear anybody's criticism about anything. Because if I'm right, I'll still be right after I hear them. If I'm on sound footing, if my definitions are accurate, right, I will still be right when they get finished saying what they need to say. I should be able to hear them without flipping out. And I can simply disagree with them when they're done, if in fact that's the case. But what I may find is that I need to redefine my definitions. Okay? So if you find yourself being resistant to that and nobody can tell you anything, and then check that, okay? Because coercive control is very, very subtle. It's very, very subtle. It's very subtle. And over time, you start to think that that's what you think, when in fact it's what you've been told to think. All right? All right. We will be back on next Saturday. We appreciate you all joining. Please feel free to share this video. You know, our objective is just to educate and inform and empower people so that they can understand that they have value. And it's important that victims of abuse are not isolated, because what happens is the only feedback that you get about who you are and your value to God and to everybody is from the abuser. And so it's helpful if you can go to work and get positive feedback. It's helpful, okay? It's helpful. I thank God for all that he has kept me through in my life. And I told the enemy this: all this stuff, all these shenanigans, you've been messing with me my entire life. Every time you do it, I'm going to turn it into a lesson, and I'm going to tell people, number one, how not to get into it in the first place, and number two, how to get out of that mess if they find themselves in it. Okay? So that's the commitment I made to myself years ago. And so we're committed to helping folk to get free from whatever is binding them up. Christ died that we would have life and have it more abundantly. That does not include abuse. And for those of you who are thinking, well, God sent me. No, he didn't. If you're being mistreated, if you're being abused, God didn't have nothing to do with that. That was all you. That was all you. When I've experienced it in my life, that was me. That was not him. That was me. That wasn't him. Okay? Many of the things that I will share with you all on these Facebook Lives are not things that I learned when I was getting my doctorate in theology. They're not things that I learned when I was getting my master's in Christian counseling, or my master's in psychology, or my bachelor's in counseling, okay? These are things that I've learned that God has walked me through. Some crazy experiences that I found myself in. He didn't tell me to do them, okay? I did them, okay? Let's just tell the truth. But he helped me to navigate them and to glean lessons from them. And I am committed to making sure, hey, Latricia, to making sure that as many as will hear can get equipped so that they can get their life back, okay? Inbox me if you want to. We started a couple of months ago a closed Facebook group for domestic violence warriors. It can be that you have a history of it. It can be that you're in a situation right now. Especially ministry leaders who don't have anywhere that they can go to be transparent and get some support. You may join thinking that you want to support others and find out through the process that you need support yourself, and that's fine. That's fine, okay? That's what we are here for. That's what we're here for. Confidentiality is vitally important. Integrity is vitally important. Anybody cross that boundary, I'm kicking them out. It doesn't matter who you are or who you think you are to me. I'm booting you out, okay? We're going to speak the truth in love. We're going to get people undergirded so that they can go on and pursue their God-given purpose in the earth. So the name of the group is Dominion Over Domestic Violence. If you're interested in joining, then make sure you can go on Facebook and request to join, and then I will look at it. I'm very, very selective. I'm determined. God has required me to do my level best to make sure that it's a safe space for people who come in there. Okay, and if you do join, then feel free to share your story. I guarantee you're going to get a lot of love and support in there. Okay, we're a very, very supportive group. It is faith-based. Okay, we believe God. We believe God, and we believe that there's nothing too hard for him. So feel free to do that. You can look us up regarding our online courses that we offer. And we're in the process of developing a package that we can put together that we can travel with. So I'm willing to come to your area, to your congregation, and do a training for your ministry leaders. We've got to get ahead of this thing. We've got to get ahead of this thing. And that means that we have to stop having people do what they think is right and help them to understand what's actually effective and what could actually put a victim in a more dangerous position. All right? So be praying for us regarding that. Prior to the end of this year, we plan to roll that training out, and we'll, like I said, be willing to go from congregation to congregation, conferences, whatever, to get your staff trained in terms of how to respond and what to look for, what to say, what not to say. Okay? Blessings to you. Thank you for signing on. I appreciate you all. Keep us in prayer, and we will be back on next week. Okay? I'll post a flyer and let you know what the topic is. The Lord always tells us what it is we should speak about. So this is why I don't have a long list for a whole year published. I listen, he tells me, and that's what we talk about. All right? Blessings to you. Apostle Cheryl L. Richardson. I love you much.